Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at.
We do not want no voucher program that's going to take away from our public schools.
Illinois could join a new federal voucher program to fund scholarships for private schools. What that could mean for education in the state. Plus, Anjanette Young survived a botched police raid on her home. Now she's sharing her story in a new book. First off tonight, the partial government shutdown comes to an end as Congress members now consider possible reforms for the Department of Homeland Security. This as a Chicago woman who survived 7 bullet wounds at the hands of a Border Patrol agent last fall told her story to members of Congress on Capitol Hill today.
On Friday, I was teaching the young children at the Montessori school, and we were singing and dancing and getting ready for spooky season, preparing fall activities to do the following week. And on Saturday, my own government was calling me a domestic terrorist. And I was in federal detention centers with the bullet holes all over my body.
Marimar Martinez described in early October when her car was struck by federal immigration agents in the Brighton Park neighborhood. She told Congress members today she had been following the SUVs and blowing her horn to alert her neighbors that agents were in the area. Martinez was later charged with assaulting the agents who shot her, but those charges were dropped by the U.S. Attorney's Office. A federal judge is expected to rule tomorrow on whether to unseal the photos and videos from the incident, as Martinez and her attorneys have requested to combat what they claim is the harm being done to her reputation. Also testifying before the joint House and Senate committees today, the brothers of Renee Nicole Good, killed by federal immigration agents last month, and the family's Chicago-based attorney. The first month of 2026 shows crime numbers in Chicago are continuing their downward trend from 2025. The Chicago Police Department says there were 29 homicides in January this year. That's 29% less than the 41 in January of last year. Also, robberies are down 31% since the start of the year, and shooting incidents down 10%. Just as the U.S. exits from the World Health Organization, the state of Illinois is joining the WHO's Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network. Governor J.B. Pritzker's office says the coordinated international network is dedicated to monitoring and responding to global disease outbreaks. By joining, Illinois public health officials will have a direct line to the organization's global alerts and expert public health networks. The state says joining the network will strengthen the state's preparedness for future pandemics and emerging threats. Northwestern football fans looking to cheer on their team from their new stadium will have to wait a few weeks into the season. That's because the Wildcats will not be debuting the new Ryan Field until week 4 of the season, when they host their Big Ten home opener against Penn State. The opening of the new $862 million, 35,000-seat stadium in Evanston is now scheduled for October 2nd. The Wildcats will play their first 2 home games at their temporary lakefront location at Martin Stadium. Up next, how a controversial new program could change education in Illinois right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Illinois is among several states deciding whether to opt into a new federal school voucher program. Under the program, which was passed by Congress in the so-called Big Beautiful Bill Act, donors can give up to $1,700 to nonprofits awarding K-12 scholarships and receive an equivalent amount back in federal tax credits. Scholarships can be used to help pay for private school tuition, along with some out-of-pocket expenses for public school families like tutoring or after-school programming. 28 states have opted into the program so far, most of which are Republican-led. The 4 states that have said no to the program are Wisconsin, New Mexico, Oregon, and Hawaii, and are all led by Democratic governors. Governor J.B. Pritzker has yet to decide whether he'll opt the state in, saying last week he was still waiting on program rules from the federal government.
Just on its face, the question is this just a repeat of trying to take money out of public schools and move it into private schools, which is what the Trump administration, generally speaking, has been in favor of? Or is this something that could be useful? But we just don't know because there are no rules around it right now.
Joining us to talk about this are Ann Corder, Education Issues Specialist for the League of Women Voters of Illinois, and Austin Berg, Executive Director for the Chicago Policy Center at the Illinois Policy Institute. Thanks to both of you for joining us to talk about this. Ann Corder, your organization, you all are among that coalition of groups that signed a letter to Governor Pritzker urging him not to opt into this program. What are your main concerns?
Yes, 40 organizations have joined us. We would like Governor Pritzker to stand up for public education, which is the backbone of our democracy. We think this should not be a partisan issue. Public schools are the most important thing that helps our workforce and provides social fabric, especially in rural communities. We are also working to educate citizens who have an opportunity to vote in a non-binding referendum on March 17th. About 10% of the population will be able to do that. Our concerns are that there is no such thing as free money, that this program will harm public education in Illinois for a variety of reasons. We think that this is not designed to help low-income students. We believe that this is wide open for waste, fraud, and abuse. And so we urge the governor to opt out.
Austin, you and your organization, you're in support of this federal program. How can the state and students in the state benefit from it?
Well, this unlocks hundreds of millions of dollars for education in Illinois. It's hundreds of millions of dollars that would otherwise go to DC or other states. So that's why you see Governor Jared Polis, Democratic governor in Colorado, say we would be crazy not to opt in. I grew up in Illinois and remember seeing, booster clubs, right, at the football games selling snacks or doing bake sales to fund scholarships or after-school programs. Imagine if every single one of those clubs across Illinois could take a $1-for-$1 federal tax credit. That unlocks tens of millions of dollars for public schools in Illinois, and that's why I think you see 28 states going for this.
Is that how I know we've got some stuff to work out, but is that how the program works, right? Like, for example, if I donate to one of these scholarship providing organizations, I can receive up to that amount back in a federal tax credit.
Yes.
But then is that necessarily unlocking millions of dollars? Doesn't that money has to come from scholarship organizations?
No, imagine I could either send $1,700 to Washington, D.C., or I could send that $1,700 to my local school community. And that could be public school, private school, after-school tutoring, any education expense. So I really do think it's a rising tide lifts all boats. And I agree with what was said before. I don't think it should be a partisan issue. That's why you see red, blue, purple states opting in.
And there are comparisons being made to the Invest in Kids scholarship program that was in Illinois. It sunset a couple of years ago. What did we learn from that program? How do you think it applies here?
It's a very comparable program. The tax credits are even more generous in this program. It's a 100% tax credit, so there is absolutely no skin in the game by the donor. It's 100% federal money coming out of our pockets as taxpayers to private religious schools. Invest in Kids saw that most of the money went to more well-off families. It went to private religious schools. And the kids were often not able to enter the school that they chose. Of the schools who were a part of that program, 50% did not have any students of color who were black, and 30% did not have Latino students. Only 15% of those schools provided special education. So to have that much federal money coming back into the state to a system that is private and religious and is not going to provide civil rights and special education opportunities for students, we think is a big mistake.
In this instance, though, the federal government says that the money is not necessarily just for private schools and institutions. Public school students could also use it for programming or other sort of assistance, provided that they meet the income qualifications.
The rules have yet to be promulgated. The law itself mentions some possibility of some tutoring services being provided for public school students, but it's been very clear from the Department of Education that no money should go to make the school budget any less tight. It will provide a possibility that students will not have access to things that they would get in a public school. Special education rights need to be waived. They need to have their funding for English language learners would not be available in those private schools. But the public aspect of it, we think, is highly unlikely to really provide much of a boon for public schools, because if you look at what the administration has done with public education in the last year, President Trump proposed cutting $300 million from education money flowing into the state. He has already cut a number of grants.
So, Austin, I want to get you back in here, because there are those who argue that, you know, the use of scholarship programs like this, that this takes money, it funnels it towards private schools, and that if students from public schools are leaving public schools to go to private schools, and that takes money from those public schools. What do you say to that argument?
I think it's misinformation to pit this as public versus private. This is about more resources for education, whatever works best for the kid. So for some kids, that's going to be some forms of private education. Other kids, they might need summer school, after school assistance. That's why the Democratic governor of Colorado opted in. He said, I would be crazy not to provide after school programs or summer school or extracurriculars. Either that money is going to the federal government or it's staying here, coming back here to Colorado. And that's what I really think the option is here is, do you want your $1,700 going to DC? Or would you like it to fund your local school community? And I think people from all political stripes would prefer if that money went to our local school communities.
There's also some supporters make the argument that, opting out of the program essentially leaves money on the table that could be supporting students. How do you respond to that, Ann?
We believe that the money that goes to Washington should be coming back to Illinois to public schools. It should be providing after-school programming and tutoring programming and fully funding the special education. We think that if we accepted this money, it would not outweigh the harm that would be caused by the private public voucher program. It will divert billions of dollars away, as Austin mentioned. It will be a huge program. It will divert that money away from the Title I programs and the special ed programs that could be coming to our state. It will divert, because there's no free money. There's no such thing as a free lunch. It comes from somewhere. Every time a student leaves,
I see you shaking your head.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to you. I promise. Austin, I see you shaking your head.
The question is, do we want to fund scholarships in other states with our federal tax money, or do we want that money coming back to Illinois? This is our money. It's not DC's money, and we shouldn't have to rely on the Trump administration to give it to us. And that's where I think the more you oppose what the Trump administration is doing right now, the more you should support this program. Your money is not going to the Trump agenda in DC. It's going to your local school community. And I think all political stripes should be on board with this, and that's why you're seeing, again, Democrat states, Republican states opting in.
And the federal government, as we've said, they're still developing the specific regulations. What are your concerns about the details that we don't know about yet?
Yeah. For example, I think I agree that it's not partisan, but I think that it should be nonpartisan the other direction. I think that no one should be supporting this program. It's wide open for fraud and abuse. You've got a 10% gets to be diverted to the scholarship granting organization. From that money that is collected, 10% goes to an intermediary organization. It's not an efficient use of funding. It's also not designed to really help low-income students, or students really at all. Research shows that voucher programs do not result in higher student achievement, particularly for low-income students. Vouchers rarely cover the entire cost of attending private religious schools. Even with a voucher, there's transportation costs, tuition, fees, books. It's too expensive for most low-income families.
And before we let you go, just got a little bit of time left. Austin, the case for school choice, it has always been there. Seems to be getting a boost from the Trump administration. Why might some families choose not to send their kids to public schools?
Well, it's not one size fits all, right? Not everybody wears the same size shoes. So some kids need different kinds of services. Maybe they live closer to a private school that their family's comfortable with, or maybe they have a program that they wouldn't be able to access elsewhere. And I think it's really important, and it is really a civil rights choice. We saw Milwaukee generations ago lead the civil rights movement for school choice with Dr. Howard Fuller just a few miles away from where we are now. And I think it remains a civil rights issue that every parent should be able to choose the education that's right for their child. And I think this definitely supports that, but also supports public schools.
Okay, that is where we'll have to leave it. Obviously, we still await the governor's decision on this. Ann Corder and Austin Berg, thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, the Chicago woman at the center of a botched police raid, how she's using her trauma to help others. It's been nearly 7 years since social worker Anjanette Young's home was mistakenly raided by Chicago police. A dozen officers stormed into her apartment without identifying themselves and ransacked the unit as she stood, naked and handcuffed, tearfully pleading with officers that they had the wrong place. Since then, the city has settled her lawsuit for $2.9 million, but she says the trauma persists. Young details the incident, the events that followed, and her journey to healing in her new book, Past the Pain: How to Emerge from Trauma with Purpose, which is out today. And joining us now is Anjanette Young. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for always giving me a space to continue to tell my story and to uplift others.
We're glad you're here and sharing your story because you've been outspoken since it happened. Probably not something easy to do. Why did you want to write a book?
I wanted to write a book to really help others who have either had my experience or had other trauma experience. As a profession, I am a licensed clinical social worker, and so it's so important for people to understand what it means to experience trauma or deal with mental health. And then also a lot of my book talks about how do you navigate that? How do you understand what your body is feeling, and where are the resources that are important for you to connect to?
Was it difficult when you got down to the writing part of it? Because obviously you probably have to relive the experience in some detail. Was that a challenge?
It was very difficult. Writing, just getting it on paper was one process of it. But when you actually get to the editing process and you have to go back and add more detail or give more emotion, the editing process was very hard for me, and it was in those moments where I knew that I had to be intentional to take care of myself in order to get the book finished.
So it's to live your life, but then also to get the book finished as well, because you talk about working to grow past the pain, title of the book, of course, and you share some advice of your therapist. What's some of that advice?
Yeah, so one of the things that I feel like my therapist helped me with the most was understanding what I was feeling in my body. So when you are triggered by something, almost 99% of the time you feel it in your body before you can understand it in your mind. And so I think the best thing my therapist helped me with was to understand what I was feeling in my body before my mind caught up to it to react to what I was feeling. And so I share some of those tips in the book as well, because understanding what you're feeling, grounding yourself, and finding a space to feel safe again was so important for me.
It makes me recall the book, The Body Keeps the Score, about the impact of trauma and how that shows up in your body. You created the I Am Her Foundation following the death of Breonna Taylor. We all know a black woman who was shot and killed by police officers in her Louisville home during a botched raid. Even you struggled with getting anyone to believe you before that video was released, thanks to our colleagues with their help at CBS 2. Why do you think people didn't believe you? Why do you think we often don't hear about the experiences of women at the hands of police violence?
I feel like historically, we hear so much violence in our cities and around our countries that until we actually see it for ourselves, sometimes it doesn't really register. So initially, when CBS2 did my first interview, we didn't have the body cam footage. And so that story didn't get a lot of attention. We told the story of what happened, but it wasn't until people were able to see it that it actually registered with them. And unfortunately, because we are so inundated with stories about trauma and, you know, another person who has been harmed, that oftentimes it doesn't register until you actually see it.
And of course, none of us can forget like the emotion in your voice hearing and watching that video once it was released. Since the incident, you've been advocating for an ordinance to reform police search warrant policies. There has been some progress. Changes made to CPD policy include verifying warrant information before execution, limiting the hours of search warrants that they are served to between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., avoiding pointing firearms at or handcuffing children unless reasonably necessary, documenting all searches, and a crisis-trained officer must be present during the raids. Now, the PD's policy was finalized late last year, no public notice. You endorsed Mayor Brandon Johnson as a candidate because he promised to ban no-knock warrants. Are you frustrated? How do you feel?
I'm frustrated with the process, absolutely. I'm also learning in this journey of being in this space that change doesn't happen overnight and that it's a marathon and not a sprint. So while I'm disappointed that we're not there yet, I believe that there is still some interest from the mayor's office. I've had great relationship with Mayor Brandon Johnson. And so he has always expressed his commitment to find a way to move this forward. And so I think that there is still some opportunity for us to do that. And I am committed to the process until we get it done.
Okay, so change doesn't happen overnight, but over 7-8 years.
It has been 7 years, and although we have not passed the ordinance, there have been small incremental changes. And so I'm okay that we're seeing little, it's like taking baby bites. So like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So there has been some change. And so there is much more change that needs to happen. And it's unfortunate that it's taken us as long as it has.
Speaking of elephants, the consent decree, it is elephantine, right? It is big. It has been expanded to include search warrants because of what happened to you. You have told us in the past that you were sort of disappointed with the consent decree, but that it's not a whole solution. Do you still feel let down by the consent decree process? How do you feel about it?
I feel the same way about the consent decree. Very slow process in getting things done. I am pleased that I have had opportunities to actually speak with the federal judge at different public hearings regarding my concern with the consent decree. Again, it's one of those things that is moving like molasses, but I am hopeful that we will start to see some change.
You've also lobbied for a change in state law for these restrictions. Are you continuing that work as well?
Absolutely. So I'm very pleased with the work that I'm doing with Representative Cam Buckner and others in Springfield. We are still very much pushing forward. It passed through committee. I've had some conversations with him recently, so we're looking at bringing it back to the table in this session in Springfield. So I'm very excited that we still have some commitment and movement at the state level.
Since 2019, the Chicago Police Department's their residential search warrants have dropped nearly 83% from 1,382 in 2019 to 228 in 2025. That is pretty substantial. What do you think that's a reflection of?
I absolutely think it's a reflection of the work that I have done and the work of the other community members who have stood with me, the coalition that Craig Futterman and his team does. I think that's a reflection of the work that has been happening, that the numbers are reducing. And so that's a move in the right direction.
Okay, so a book is out now. What's next for you?
The book actually was just me wanting to help people to understand what it means to live with trauma and how to heal from trauma. What's next for me right now is I am very excited that I have the freedom to go out and support other families who have had these experiences. So I've had an opportunity to work with the Sonia Massey family. I had an opportunity to go to DC and work with the Martin family who had a case in the Supreme Court around FBI raids. And even today I went over to the courthouse, and I sat with the Tate family, who is starting their trial around the wrong race. So those are the things that I'm most excited about moving forward.
All right, it's unfortunate that there is a community of people who have experienced this, but I think maybe the win is that they have you and each other to work together on healing from events like this. Anjanette Young, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Again, the book is called Past the Pain, How to Emerge from Trauma with Purpose. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Reflecting the people and perspectives that make up our communities, this story is part of Chicago Tonight, Black Voices.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Stay connected with our reporters and what they're working on by following us on Instagram at WTTW Chicago. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm, righting the heaviest wrongs for more than 40 years.